Hello, we're going to look at how you write the equation of a sine or cosine curve. If you're given the graph, but that's pretty much it. So you really only need a couple of things, and the first two things are actually super easy. So you want to remember the general form of these equations. So if you look at the very top of the page, I have them listed right here for you. So if we take a look, we have either y equals a sine b of x or y equals a cosine b of x. Okay, so remember that a is just the amplitude. So if you remember, that's just the number that you're bouncing in between. How high and how low are you going? Okay, so that's easy enough. And then to determine if it's going to be sine or cosine, that's also pretty easy because sine is going to start at the origin. Or maybe I shouldn't say start. It passes through the origin. Hold on, let's erase that. Passes through the origin, because they go on forever, so how would it start there, right? So passes through origin. Okay, so if it doesn't pass through the origin, obviously you're going to choose cosine. Okay, now the B is a little bit trickier to figure out, but it's not that bad. And I'm going to show you two different ways depending on what your graph looks like. So what you're going to want to do is you want to count, or you want to look at your graph and figure out how long it takes for the graph to complete one full cycle. So actually, let me zoom back over here to number 1, and we'll kind of work through that one together so you can get a sense of how to do it. Okay, so here's number 1. So the very first thing I need to do is determine if I'm going to have a sine or a cosine curve. So I'm looking at this and it does not pass through the origin. So that means it's going to be a cosine curve. Okay, so that's easy enough. So now I know I'm dealing with this. Y equals a cosine b of x. Okay, so I know that it's going to be cosine. A is also very easy to figure out because I just look at how high and how low my graph goes. See how it's bouncing in between +4 and -4? That means my amplitude is just 4. So I already have the whole first portion of this. It's going to be 4 cosine, and then I just have to figure out what b is. X is just the variable that's going to stay there, and that could be theta or whatever, but usually it's going to be x, so we're just going to leave it as x. We just have to figure out what b is, okay? And I mentioned there's two different ways. So the first way to do it is to, oops. Oh, that's fine. Okay. All right, sorry. The first way to do it, let me switch to a highlighter of a different color so we can kind of take a look. A cosine curve starts up high, it goes all the way down, and it comes back up. That is one full cycle. Okay, do you see that? So that happened, that's one full cycle of the cosine curve. Goes all the way down, comes all the way back up. So I would not use this first method to determine what b is because it involves knowing exactly where I am when that happens. And I don't know what value that is. So I did one full circle, and I'm somewhere in between pi/2 and 3pi/4, but I don't know exactly where. So my other option is to find 2 pi, and that's all the way over here. And what I can do is I can count how many full cycles cosine has gone through from 0 to 2 pi. So here I have 1. Let me switch colors and I'll do another one. Here is a second full cycle of the cosine curve. And I have a third full cycle. So that means that b is going to be 3 in this case. Okay, so when I go to my equation, I just put in a 3x. Okay, and that whole thing is my answer right there. That's it. You're done. Y equals 4 cosine 3x. All right, let's try number 2 and see how that goes. Okay, so again, first I asked myself, is this going to be sine or cosine? Well, it is not crossing through the origin, so that means it's going to be cosine again. All right, so let's switch colors here. So now I know, and I can do my amplitude again. That's pretty easy. So again, it appears as though I'm bouncing in between 4 and -4, so it'll just be 4 cosine, and then I just have to figure out what b is. Okay, now I see 2 pi on my graph. It's right here, but I have no idea how much of the cycle I've passed through. Well, I kind of know, but anyway, it's not like the last one where it's very clear how much I had gone through. So my other option is to just see, okay, well, how long does it take for me to do one full cycle? So let's look. If I do one full cycle, starting at the top, come all the way down, go all the way back up. Okay, I'm going to darken that a little bit. So this green portion here shows me one full cycle of cosine, and it took 8 pi to do it. So in order to figure out what goes in for b, this is what you're going to do. Let's do, okay, we can do red. So all I have to do to figure out b is I do 2 pi divided by b and set it equal to whatever it took for me to complete one cycle. So in this case, that would be 8 pi. Okay, one full cycle happened in 8 pi. So that's the value that goes right there. Now, all I have to do is solve for b. So the easiest way to do this, in my opinion, if you're looking at this and you don't just know it, you can just set it up like a proportion, right? And then cross multiply. So I might do 2 pi times 1 is just 2 pi. And then multiply the other side. B times 8 pi is b times 8 pi. And then if I want to solve for b, just divide both sides by 8 pi. So you'll see pi's cancel, and 2 divided by 8 just reduces to be 1/4. So in this case, b is going to be 1/4, which means my final answer looks like this. Let's stick with green. I was here, but now I know what b is, so I'll just go up here to write my final answer. Y equals 4 cosine 1/4 x. Okay, does that make sense? So if you can see where how many full cycles have happened in 2 pi, you know that that's just going to be b. If you can't, you can figure out, okay, well, how long does it take me to complete one cycle? And then you just use that formula that I have. I'll write it again here. It's just 2 pi over b, and you set that equal to, right here, you would put how long it takes for the curve to complete one full cycle. So in this case, it was 8 pi, and then you just solve for b. Okay, so that's as hard as these get. We can do one more together. Let's do one that's why are these all cosine? Okay, here. Number 5. So this one is sine, right? This one's passing through the origin, so I know I'm going to start off with a sine b of x. Or bx. Okay, so, and I know my amplitude is just 3. So I'll have 3 sine, and now I just have to figure out what b is. So I do see 2 pi, and I think I can count how many full cycles happen in 2 pi. So I can do that. So I'll actually switch to the highlighter again, and maybe blue. So let's count. Sine starts at the origin, right? So one full cycle, remember, that is not one full cycle right there. That only has the top part. You got to go all the way up and then all the way down. That is one full cycle. You see that? Let's switch to yellow. And so my second full cycle starts here. Oh, come on. and does that. There's the second full cycle. And then let's do one more cycle. Starts here and goes bloop to end at 2 pi. Okay, so there were 3 full cycles that happened in 2 pi, which means my answer is just going to be 3x. Okay, I hope this makes sense. Yeah, all right. Let me know if you have any questions. Please try the rest of these. Thanks.